The elevator lurched, metal screaming against metal, and Ethan Cole's stomach dropped, not from the fall, but from the clock on his phone. 11:47 a.m. Ellie's birthday lunch in 13 minutes, and he was trapped between floors with the one woman who could destroy everything he had left. Cassandra Vale stood across from him, CEO of the empire that just bought his building, her heels planted on marble that cost more than his annual salary. She was checking her watch, annoyed by the inconvenience. He was checking his daughter's last text. "Daddy, you promised." Outside this steel cage, a $3 billion machine was about to erase his neighborhood, and neither of them knew they had minutes, not hours, before the real danger began. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's see how far this story travels. The morning had started the way every morning started for Ethan Cole, with promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "Daddy, you're coming to lunch, right?" Ellie had asked at breakfast, her 8-year-old eyes wide with that particular brand of hope that made his chest ache. "You promised. It's my birthday." "I promised," Ethan had said, kissing the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Noon, Angelo's Pizza. I'll be there." She'd smiled then, the smile that looked so much like Sarah's it sometimes stopped him cold, and bounced off to where Mrs. Chen from 4B was waiting to walk her to school. Ethan had stood in the doorway of their apartment, watching until they turned the corner, then checked his phone. 3 hours until lunch. Plenty of time to fix whatever had blown a circuit on the 14th floor and get back. That was before he knew about the elevator. That was before he knew about Cassandra Vale. That was before he understood that some mornings don't start bad. They start catastrophic and spend the rest of the day proving it. Now, at 11:47 a.m., Ethan Cole stood in an elevator that had stopped moving 3 minutes ago, watching the numbers above the door flicker between 11 and 12 like they couldn't decide which lie to tell. His tool bag sat at his feet. His phone showed no signal. And across the elevator, separated by maybe 6 feet of expensive marble flooring, stood a woman who looked like she'd never been inconvenienced a day in her life. Cassandra Vale. He knew who she was. Everyone in the building knew who she was. She was the one who'd bought Horizon Tower 6 months ago, the one whose company had gutted the maintenance staff and replaced half of them with contractors, the one whose face appeared in business magazines with headlines like "The Ice Queen of Real Estate" and "How Cassandra Vale Turns Buildings into Billions." She was tall, taller than him when she wore those heels, with dark hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. Her suit probably cost more than his rent. Everything about her screamed precision. The sharp line of her jaw, the perfect paint of her nails, the way she held her phone like it was an extension of her hand. Right now that phone was pressed to her ear, and her voice could have cut glass. "I don't care what the fire department says, Marcus. I have a board meeting in 15 minutes. Get someone up here now." She paused, listening, and her expression didn't change. "Then override it. That's what we pay engineers for." Ethan felt something twist in his gut. That's what we pay engineers for. Like they were parts in a machine. Like they weren't people who might have good reasons for saying no. He pressed the emergency call button again. Still nothing. The intercom had been dead since the elevator stopped. "Excuse me?" he said, keeping his voice level. "The emergency system's not responding. The intercom's out." Cassandra lowered her phone, looking at him for the first time. Her eyes were gray, the color of winter clouds, and they swept over him in one quick, dismissive glance. Maintenance uniform. Tool bag. Not important. "I'm aware," she said. "I'm handling it." "I'm sure you are." Ethan crouched down and opened his tool bag. "But I'm going to try the panel anyway. The call button might be on a separate circuit." "The building has people for that." "Yeah." Ethan pulled out his screwdriver. "I'm one of them." He didn't wait for permission. The panel came off easily, 4 screws, standard housing, and behind it was a mess of wiring that made him wince. Newer systems integrated everything: power, communications, emergency systems, all running through the same control board, efficient on paper, fragile in practice. One failure cascades into everything else. And this one had definitely failed. "The main board's fried," he said, mostly to himself. "Looks like an overload." The emergency call routes through the same system, so when it went, "Can you fix it?" Ethan glanced back at her. She was watching him now, phone lowered, her expression unreadable. Not from inside the elevator, he said. Someone needs to access the main shaft controls. But I can tell you why it happened. Why? The system's overloaded. Too many smart features running on infrastructure that wasn't designed for it. The AI integration you installed, it's pulling more power than the original specs allowed. Eventually, something gives. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. That's not possible. The system was tested. It's been operational for 3 months. It's been glitching for 3 months, Ethan said, turning back to the panel. Ask anyone who works in this building. Elevators stopping between floors, doors that don't open, climate control that cuts out. I filed a dozen maintenance reports. I haven't seen any reports. No, Ethan said quietly. I don't imagine you have. There was a long silence. Then, what does that mean? Ethan sat back on his heels, looking at the tangle of wires. What did it mean? It meant that maintenance reports got filtered through 3 layers of management before they reached anyone who mattered. It meant that problems got smoothed over, minimized, erased. It meant that the people who lived with the consequences of bad decisions never got to talk to the people who made them. But he didn't say that. Instead, he said, it means the problems didn't seem important enough to escalate. Maintenance issues, small stuff. Trapping a CEO in an elevator isn't small stuff. No, Ethan agreed, but trapping other people was. He felt her gaze sharpen, but before she could respond, his phone buzzed. Text message. It cut through despite the lack of signal. SMS could do that sometimes, finding a gap in the concrete and steel. Daddy, where are you? Mrs. Chen says it's almost time. Ethan's throat tightened. 11:51 a.m. 9 minutes. Problem? Cassandra asked. My daughter, Ethan said, thumbs moving across the screen. It's her birthday. I promised her lunch. He sent back. Stuck in elevator. Will be there soon as I can. I promise. Love you, Ellybug. The message hung there for a moment, searching for signal, then flickered to sent. Barely. He stared at it, willing the elevator to move, willing time to stop, willing the universe to give him this one thing. How old? Cassandra's voice was different now, quieter. 8. That's young. Yeah. Ethan put his phone away and stood up. It is. He walked to the elevator doors and ran his fingers along the seam where they met. Sometimes, if the lock mechanism had failed but the doors themselves weren't jammed, you could force them open manually. Get enough light in to see. Maybe signal someone. Behind him, Cassandra said, You have a son or daughter? Daughter, Ellie. Just the 2 of you? Ethan's hands stilled on the doors. He didn't talk about this. Not at work. Not with strangers. Especially not with the CEO who held his entire life in her hands. But something about being trapped made the walls thin. Her mom died 3 years ago, he said. Cancer, so yeah. Just us. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they've stepped into deeper water than they meant to. I'm sorry, Cassandra said finally. Thanks. Ethan wedged his fingers into the door seam and pulled. Nothing. I promised Ellie I'd always show up. That's the deal. I show up no matter what. Even trapped in an elevator. Especially trapped in an elevator. He pulled harder, muscles straining. Because if I don't show up, she starts thinking maybe I won't show up next time. And then the time after that. And pretty soon, the elevator lurched. It was violent and sudden. A drop of maybe 3 inches that sent Ethan stumbling backward and Cassandra's phone clattering to the floor. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The number above the door blinked. 11, 12, 11. Then nothing. What was that? Cassandra's voice was sharp, controlled, but Ethan heard the threat of fear underneath. Power surge, maybe, or the system trying to reboot. He retrieved her phone from the floor. The screen was cracked, spiderwebbing across the corner, and handed it back. Are you okay? Fine. She took the phone, tested the screen. Still functional. You? Yeah. But his heart was hammering now. Engineer's instincts lighting up warning signs in his head. Modern elevators had fail-safes. Multiple redundancies. They didn't just lurch like that unless something was very wrong, unless multiple systems were failing at once. Cassandra was back on her phone, voice clipped. Marcus, something just happened. The elevator dropped. Get someone here now, or I swear. Another lurch, harder this time. Ethan moved on instinct. The elevator tilted, gravity doing terrible things, and Cassandra stumbled in those impossible heels. He caught her before she hit the wall, one arm around her shoulders, steadying her as the elevator shuddered and groaned, and finally, mercifully, stopped. They stood frozen for a moment, breathing hard. Cassandra's hand was fisted in his shirt. His arm was still around her. This close, he could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold, like winter gardens, and see the crack in her armor, the white edge around her lips, the rapid pulse in her throat. You can let go now, she said quietly. Right, sorry. Ethan stepped back, hands raised. Sorry. Cassandra straightened her jacket, reestablishing the distance. But something had shifted. When she looked at him now, she really saw him. That shouldn't have happened, she said. No, it shouldn't have. You said the system's been glitching for 3 months. At least. Why didn't anyone escalate? Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really want to know? Yes. Because the people who see the problems aren't the people who get listened to. Because maintenance workers file reports and they disappear into some database nobody checks. Because the contractors you hired don't care about long-term stability. They care about checking boxes and getting paid. And because... He stopped himself. Because what? Ethan met her eyes. Because you just bought this building 6 months ago. You've never been in the basement. You've never talked to the maintenance staff. You don't know our names. To you, we're just the people who make things work. And as long as things appear to work, you assume we're doing our jobs. Cassandra's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Anger, maybe. Or recognition. You don't know me, she said. No, Ethan agreed. I don't, but I know your company. I know how many people got laid off when you restructured. I know you replaced full-time staff with contractors. I know... He stopped because his phone was buzzing again. Daddy, it's 12:01. Are you coming? The words hit like a fist to the chest. 1 minute late, already broken his promise, already failing her. He typed back, I'm so sorry, Bug. Still stuck. I'll make it up to you, I promise. But even as he sent it, he knew. Promises from inside an elevator weren't worth much. Your daughter, Cassandra said. Yeah. You should call her. Let her hear your voice. No signal for calls, just texts, barely. Ethan put his phone away and walked back to the control panel. We need to get out of here. Agreed. What can we do? We? Ethan looked at her, surprised. You're the one who knows how this works. Tell me what to do. It was the first time she'd asked instead of commanded. The first time she'd admitted she didn't have all the answers. Ethan considered the elevator, the lurching, the power fluctuations, the complete failure of the emergency systems. The AI integration, he said slowly. The one controlling the building. What's it called? Horizon AI. Why? Because I think that's what's failing, not just the elevator, the whole system. The AI is supposed to optimize everything, power distribution, climate control, elevator routing. But if it's making bad decisions, or if it's been programmed to prioritize the wrong things, it was tested extensively, Cassandra said. 6 months of trials before full deployment. Yeah? Ethan pulled up the control panel interface on his phone. Maintenance access. Something he'd fought to keep when the contractors came in. Then why does the log show 47 elevator incidents in the last 3 months? Why are there reports of doors sealing people in apartments? Why did the fire suppression system activate on the 23rd floor last week for no reason? He turned the phone so she could see the maintenance logs. Rows and rows of incident reports, each one flagged and ignored. Cassandra stared at the screen. Her face was unreadable, but her fingers tightened on her phone. I haven't seen any of this, she said. No, you haven't, because somebody decided you didn't need to see it. Who? I don't know. But whoever it is, they're telling you the system is flawless. They're telling you Horizon AI is ready to scale. Cassandra looked up sharply. How do you know about that? About what? The scaling. Horizon 2.0. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't supposed to know. But maintenance workers heard things. They were in the walls, under the floors, present and invisible. I know you're planning a major development, he said carefully, a $3 billion smart building project. I know it's going to replace a whole neighborhood, including mine. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Your neighborhood, Cassandra repeated. Riverside Commons, the apartment complex 5 blocks east. Section 8 housing, mostly. Some rent-controlled units. You bought the land last year. Ethan's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. My apartment is there. Ellie's school is 2 blocks away. Everything that still feels like home, everything that still has Sarah in it, is in that neighborhood. Cassandra's expression shifted. Something complicated moved across her face. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. The realization that the numbers on her spreadsheet had names. The development will include affordable housing, she said. Protections for existing residents? Affordable for who? Ethan cut in. Affordable by what metric? You're building luxury smart buildings, Ms. Vale. Whatever affordable units you include won't be for people like me. And even if they were, even if I could afford it, his voice cracked just slightly. That's not Ellie's home. That's not where her mother lived. That's not where we scattered Sarah's ashes in the community garden she loved. Cassandra opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since the elevator stopped, she looked uncertain. I didn't know, she said finally. No, you didn't, because you're not supposed to know. You're supposed to see opportunity, investment, returns. You're supposed to see the future. Ethan gestured around the elevator. But this is the future, Ms. Vale. This is what happens when you prioritize systems over people, when you optimize for profit and call it progress. That's not, Cassandra started, but the elevator lurched again. This time, it wasn't just a shudder. This time, the floor dropped, really dropped, and Ethan felt his stomach fly into his throat as they fell. 2 feet. 3. The emergency brake screamed, metal on metal, and then they caught. The elevator stopped. They were both on the floor now, Cassandra's phone skittering across the marble. Ethan's tool bag spilled open. The lights flickered again, and in the stuttering darkness, Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, loud and fast. Are you hurt? His voice came out rough. No, you? I'm okay. But they weren't okay, not even close. Because now, in the sudden silence after the fall, Ethan could hear something new. A high-pitched whine, like metal under stress, like cables stretching, like something about to give. He crawled to his tool bag and pulled out his flashlight. The beam cut through the dimness, and he aimed it up at the ceiling panel where the emergency hatch should be. What are you doing? Cassandra asked. We can't wait for rescue. The cables are compromised. We need to get out now. How? Ethan stood up, testing his balance as the elevator swayed slightly. Emergency hatch. We climb up to the shaft, get to the next floor, force the doors. That's insane. Yeah, but staying here is worse. He looked at her, this woman in her $1,000 suit and her armor of certainty. Can you climb? Cassandra stared at him. Then, slowly, she reached down and unbuckled her heels, kicked them off, stood in stockinged feet, 5 inches shorter and somehow more real. Yes, she said. I can climb. Ethan nodded. Okay, then let's go. He climbed onto the railing that ran along the elevator wall, decorative brass, sturdy enough to hold his weight, and pushed at the ceiling panel. It resisted for a moment, then popped free. Cool air rushed in, carrying the smell of oil and concrete. Above them, the shaft stretched up into darkness. Below? Ethan didn't look below. I'll go first, he said. Make sure it's stable. Then you follow. He pulled himself up through the hatch, muscles straining, and emerged onto the roof of the elevator car. The shaft was dark except for thin lines of light where floor indicators glowed. The cables that held the elevator were visible in his flashlight beam, thick steel braids that looked intact but were singing that terrible high note of stress. Ethan shone the light around until he found what he was looking for, the service ladder. It ran up the shaft wall, metal rungs bolted into concrete. There's a ladder, he called down, about 6 feet away. I'll help you across. Cassandra's face appeared in the hatch, pale in the shadows. She looked up at the shaft, down at the darkness below, then back at Ethan. If I fall, she said, my lawyers will destroy you. If you fall, Ethan said, reaching down, lawyers will be the least of our problems. She took his hand. Her grip was strong, her movements careful but not hesitant. Ethan pulled her up onto the elevator roof, and for a moment they stood there together, balanced on a metal box suspended in darkness. The ladder, Ethan said, pointing. I'll go first. Stay close. The crossing was the worst part. The gap between the elevator and the ladder felt enormous, even though it was only 6 feet. Ethan stepped onto the edge of the car, reached for the ladder, and swung himself across. The metal was cold under his hands, solid and real. Your turn, he said, just like I did. Trust the ladder. Cassandra stood on the edge of the elevator, still in her stockings, her suit jacket abandoned somewhere below. She looked at the gap, looked at him, took a breath, and jumped. Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist as she caught the ladder, steadying her until she found her footing. For a second they were face to face, both clinging to metal in the dark, breathing hard. Okay? He asked. Okay, she said. They climbed. It was slow work, hand over hand, feet finding rungs, bodies pressed close to the wall. Ethan kept his flashlight pointed up, looking for the floor 12 doors. Below them, the elevator groaned. Don't look down, Ethan said. Wasn't planning on it. They climbed in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Ethan's shoulders burned, his hands ached, but then, finally, the flashlight beam caught metal, the door mechanism for floor 12. We're here, he said. The elevator doors on floor 12 were closed, smooth metal with a thin seam down the middle. Ethan wedged his fingers into the seam and pulled. Nothing. The lock mechanism is engaged, he said. I need to override it. How? There should be a manual release. He ran his hands along the door frame, feeling for the small lever that would disengage the lock. Here. He pulled the release, heard a click, then put both hands on the door seam and pulled. The doors resisted. Then with a metallic shriek they started to move, inch by inch. Light spilled in, blessed, beautiful, ordinary hallway light. Help me, Ethan grunted. Cassandra grabbed the door edge and pulled with him. Together, straining, they forced the doors open wide enough to squeeze through. Ethan went first, rolling onto the carpeted hallway floor. Then he turned and reached back for Cassandra. She took his hand and he pulled her through, out of the shaft, out of the darkness, into the light. They lay there on the floor of the 12th floor hallway for a moment, breathing hard. Somewhere down the corridor, Ethan could hear voices, people emerging from offices to see what the noise was about. Cassandra sat up slowly. Her hair had come loose from its severe knot. Her suit was smudged with oil and dust. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. I can't believe we just did that, she said. Yeah. Ethan pulled out his phone. 12:17 p.m., 17 minutes late. I can't either. He had 6 missed texts from Ellie, each one a little more worried than the last. Cassandra stood up, barefoot, and looked at him. Call her. Let her know you're okay. I need to check the system, Ethan said. If the elevator failed that badly, if the cables were compromised, call your daughter first. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a suggestion. It was something else. Something that sounded almost like understanding. Ethan called Ellie. She answered on the first ring. Daddy? Hey, Bug. I'm so sorry. I got stuck. Are you okay? Her voice was small and scared and 8 years old. I'm okay. I'm safe. I promise. Ethan closed his eyes. I'm sorry I missed lunch. It's okay, Daddy. And there it was, that terrible understanding in her voice, the sound of a child who'd already learned that sometimes promises break. We can have dinner instead. Mrs. Chen bought me pizza. I love you, Ellie. Love you too. He hung up and found Cassandra watching him. You have to go, she said. The system. You have to go, Cassandra repeated. It's her birthday. I'll handle the system. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. At this woman who'd been a stranger an hour ago, who'd judged him without seeing him, who'd built an empire on numbers and never asked about the names. "You don't know what you're looking for," he said. "Then you'll have to show me. But first," she gestured toward the elevators, toward the stairs, toward the exit. "Go be her dad. That's your job." "I'm maintenance. This building is my responsibility." "No." Cassandra's voice was firm now, with an edge of something that might have been respect. "This building is my responsibility. You're right about that. I bought it. I own it. And I've been letting other people tell me it works fine while it falls apart." She held out her hand. "Give me your phone number. I'll call you in 3 hours. We'll go through every system, every report, everything. But right now, you keep your promise." Ethan stared at her. Then slowly he pulled out his phone and read her his number. Cassandra typed it in, tested it. His phone buzzed in his hand. 3 hours, she said. 3 hours, Ethan agreed. He turned to go, then stopped, looked back. "Ms. Vale?" "Cassandra," she corrected. "I think we're past formalities." "Cassandra, the Horizon 2.0 project, the $3 billion, the smart buildings you're planning." He chose his words carefully. "If this is what happens when the AI fails in one elevator, if this is what happens in a system you've been testing for 6 months, what do you think happens when you scale it across an entire neighborhood?" He didn't wait for an answer. He walked to the stairs and started down, taking them 2 at a time, racing toward Angelo's Pizza and a daughter who'd learned too young that promises were fragile things. Behind him, Cassandra Vale stood barefoot in the hallway, holding her cracked phone, staring at the elevator doors they'd just escaped. And something in her perfect, controlled world began to crack too. Because Ethan Cole had asked the right question, and Cassandra Vale, for the first time in 6 months, didn't have an answer. The question followed Cassandra down the hallway like a shadow she couldn't shake. She walked past curious faces, executives emerging from offices, assistants whispering behind hands, and felt the weight of their stares. The CEO, who'd disappeared into an elevator in a pristine suit and emerged looking like she'd crawled through a construction site, hair falling loose, stockings torn, no shoes. She didn't care about the stairs. She cared about the question, what happens when you scale it across an entire neighborhood? Her phone buzzed. Marcus, her operations director, his voice tight with professional concern, masking personal annoyance. "Ms. Vale, thank God. Are you injured? We've been trying to reach conference room now." Cassandra's voice came out harder than she intended. "And get me every maintenance report filed in the last 6 months. Everything. Don't filter it." "The board meeting started 10 minutes ago. They're waiting." "Let them wait. Conference room, 20 minutes. She hung up and walked toward her office, ignoring the trail of shocked expressions she left behind. Inside, she locked the door and stood for a moment in the silence, looking at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. She looked like someone who'd survived something. Hair tangled, face pale, a smudge of oil across her cheek that she hadn't noticed until now. But it was her eyes that stopped her. They looked different, uncertain. Cassandra Vale didn't do uncertain. She pulled her hair back, washed her face in the private bathroom, found a spare pair of heels and a blazer. Armor, control, the things she knew how to wear. By the time she walked into the conference room, she looked like herself again, except for the knowledge now sitting in her chest like a stone. The conference table was already full. Marcus at the head, flanked by her senior team, Claire from acquisitions, David from finance, Jennifer from operations. They all stood when she entered, faces carefully neutral. "Sit," Cassandra said. She remained standing. "I want to know why I haven't seen maintenance reports." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Maintenance reports. Incident logs, system failures. The elevator that trapped me today wasn't the first problem with Horizon AI, was it?" A glance passed between Marcus and Jennifer. Quick, practiced. "There have been minor issues," Jennifer said carefully. "Typical integration challenges. Nothing that raised red flags." Define minor issues. "Some elevator delays, a few climate control glitches, one false alarm on the fire suppression system, all within acceptable parameters for a new system rollout." Cassandra pulled out her phone and called up the maintenance logs Ethan had shown her, scrolled through them. 47 elevator incidents, door sealing residents in apartments, temperature fluctuations causing heat exhaustion in 2 elderly residents, a power surge that killed the backup generators. She looked up. Those sound like acceptable parameters to you? The room went very quiet. Those reports came from maintenance staff, Marcus said finally. Not engineers, not certified inspectors. We had external consultants review the system monthly. They found no significant issues. Did the consultants talk to the maintenance staff? They reviewed the technical specifications. That's not what I asked. Marcus straightened his tie. Ms. Vale, with respect, maintenance staff aren't qualified to assess AI integration systems. They see problems that don't exist because they don't understand the technology. The consultants are paid to tell us what we want to hear. Cassandra set her phone on the table. I want the raw data. Every report, every incident, every complaint. And I want the maintenance staff in this room, starting with Ethan Cole. The janitor. David looked incredulous. The electrical engineer, Cassandra corrected. The one who kept us alive in that elevator while your flawless system nearly killed us. The silence that followed was different now, heavy with things unsaid. Claire cleared her throat. Cassandra, the board is waiting. Horizon 2.0 is on the agenda. If we delay, then we delay. Cassandra walked to the windows, looking out at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there, 5 blocks east, was a neighborhood full of people she'd never met. People whose homes she'd bought without ever walking their streets. How many families are we displacing for Horizon 2.0? We're not displacing anyone, Claire said smoothly. We're redeveloping underutilized properties, creating affordable housing, community spaces. How many families, Claire? The current buildings house approximately 340 units, but the development plan includes 450 affordable. Are they affordable for the people already living there? Claire hesitated. The income requirements are based on area median income. Some current residents will qualify. Some. Cassandra turned from the window. And the rest? Will receive relocation assistance, market rate compensation for any displacement. It's all in the community impact report, which I never read. The words came out flat. True. I approved Horizon 2.0 based on financial projections, return on investment, market positioning. I never asked what happens to the 340 families who live there now. Marcus leaned forward. Cassandra, this is a business decision, not a social services initiative. We're in the business of destroying communities to build smart buildings on top of them. Cassandra's voice was quiet, but something in it made everyone sit back. Buildings controlled by AI systems that trap people in elevators, that prioritize efficiency over safety, that fail in ways we don't understand because we never ask the people who actually work with them every day. The system passed all inspections, Jennifer insisted. The consultants certified. The consultants were wrong. Cassandra placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. And we're about to deploy that same flawed system across an entire neighborhood. Residential buildings, schools, community centers. $3 billion of infrastructure controlled by AI that we don't understand and maintenance workers we don't trust. David's expression shifted. You want to delay Horizon 2.0. I want to understand what we're actually building. The board will never approve a delay. We have investors, timelines, commitments. Then the board, Cassandra said clearly, needs to hear what I heard today. She walked to the door, then stopped. Conference room, 1 hour. 1. I want Ethan Cole here. I want the raw maintenance data. And I want someone to explain to me why a maintenance worker knows more about my building's failures than I do. She didn't wait for responses. She walked out, leaving her team staring at each other in the sudden silence. Her assistant Michael intercepted her in the hallway. Ms. Vale, the board, tell them we're postponing. Technical review required before we proceed. They've already been waiting 40 minutes. Mr. Richardson is threatening to, let him threaten. Cassandra kept walking. Get me Ethan Cole's file and find out where he lives. Michael hurried to keep up. His address is in Riverside Commons. Cassandra stopped. The development site. Yes, ma'am? Which building? Building 7, I think. Unit 4B. Building 7. One of the oldest structures in the complex, slated for demolition in Phase 1. She'd signed off on it 3 months ago, barely glancing at the survey photos. Cassandra pulled out her phone and dialed the number Ethan had given her. It rang 4 times before he answered, and she could hear voices in the background, a child's laughter, the clatter of dishes. "This is Ethan. It's Cassandra Vale. Are you with your daughter?" "Yes, we're having her birthday dinner. You said 3 hours. I need you to come back to the office. There's something you need to see." There was a long pause, then, "Ms. Vale, Cassandra. Cassandra, with respect, I just spent an hour trapped in your elevator and missed my daughter's birthday lunch. I'm not leaving her again today." "I understand that. I'm asking anyway." "Why?" Cassandra looked at Michael, then walked a few steps away, lowering her voice. "Because I just pulled 47 maintenance reports that no one ever showed me. Because my operations team can't explain why the consultant saw no problems while your report showed system failures every week. Because I'm about to walk into a board meeting and halt a $3 billion project, and I need someone in that room who actually knows what's broken." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're going to halt Horizon 2.0. I don't know yet, but I need to understand it first, and you're the only person who's been honest with me today." More silence. Cassandra could hear that child's voice again, clearer now. "Daddy, who is it?" "Work bug," Ethan said softly. Then, to Cassandra, "I can't. Not tonight. Tomorrow, I'll show you everything. The control rooms, the logs, every incident. But tonight, I need to be her dad." "I understand." And she did, surprisingly. "Tomorrow, then, 8 a.m. Meet me in the lobby." "The lobby?" "I want you to show me what I haven't been seeing." She hung up and found Michael still waiting, holding a tablet. "Mr. Richardson is insisting on proceeding with the board meeting," he said. "He says they've waited long enough." "Then let's not keep them waiting." The boardroom was on the 35th floor, all glass and steel and leather chairs arranged around a table that cost more than most people's cars. 8 board members, representing billions in investment capital, sat waiting with expressions ranging from concerned to irritated. Richard Richardson, the board chairman, stood when Cassandra entered. "Cassandra, thank God you're all right. We heard about the elevator incident." "Thank you, Richard. I'm fine." Cassandra took her seat at the head of the table, and I need to address that incident before we discuss Horizon 2.0. The agenda can wait. Cassandra opened her laptop and pulled up the maintenance reports. "The elevator that trapped me today failed because our AI system is flawed. Not minor glitches. Not integration challenges. Fundamental failures in how the system prioritizes safety versus efficiency." She clicked through images, incident reports, timestamps, descriptions of failures that had been filed and ignored for months. "Our maintenance staff has been documenting these problems since the system launched," she continued. 47 elevator incidents, power surges, climate control failures causing health risks to residents. None of it was escalated to me because we've created a culture where the people who see the problems aren't considered qualified to report them." Richard frowned. "Our consultants certified the system, multiple inspections, certified the technical specifications, not the real-world performance. The consultants never talked to the maintenance staff, never asked the people who work with the system daily. They checked boxes and took our money and told us what we wanted to hear." "That's a serious accusation," Richard said. "It's a serious problem." Cassandra closed her laptop and looked at each board member in turn. "We're preparing to deploy the same system across Horizon 2.0, residential buildings, schools, community centers. $3 billion of infrastructure controlled by AI that has proven, not theoretically, but actually proven, to fail in dangerous ways." "What are you proposing?" This from Margaret Chen, the board's technical advisor. "A full independent audit. Not by consultants we hire, by engineers with no stake in telling us the system works. And we bring in the maintenance staff, the people who actually see the failures, to document everything we've missed." "That could take months," Richard said. "We have investors waiting, construction timelines. If we delay now, we risk building death traps," Cassandra said bluntly. "We risk replicating today's failures across an entire neighborhood. And when, not if when, something catastrophic happens, we're not just liable. We're responsible for people getting hurt, or worse." The room fell silent. Margaret Chen leaned forward. "How bad was the elevator incident?" Bad enough that we had to climb out through the emergency hatch and scale the shaft ladder to escape. Bad enough that the cables were failing. Bad enough that the emergency communication system was completely dead. Cassandra's voice stayed level. Bad enough that if I'd been alone, without a maintenance worker who understood the system, I might not be sitting here. The maintenance worker saved you? Margaret asked. Ethan Cole. He's an electrical engineer who stepped down to maintenance work 3 years ago to raise his daughter after his wife died. He's been filing reports about these failures for months, and we ignored him because he wears a maintenance uniform instead of a suit. Richard sat back, his expression unreadable. You're asking us to delay a $3 billion project based on the opinion of a janitor. I'm asking us to pause long enough to understand what we're building, to verify that the system is actually safe before we scale it, to listen to the people who've been telling us it's broken. Cassandra met his eyes. And yes, that includes a maintenance worker whose engineering degree is probably more relevant than any consultant's report. This is unprecedented, Richard said. So is trapping your CEO in an elevator, Cassandra replied. So is deploying AI systems we don't fully understand. So is demolishing a neighborhood without ever asking what happens to the people who live there. Margaret's eyes sharpened. You're questioning the development itself. I'm questioning whether we've done our due diligence, not just financially, humanly. We're displacing 340 families. Have any of us ever walked those streets? Talked to the residents? Asked what they need instead of assuming we know? That's not how development works, Richard said. We assess markets, not individuals. Maybe that's the problem. The silence that followed was different, uncomfortable. Several board members shifted in their seats. Finally, Margaret spoke. What specifically do you want, Cassandra? 6 months, a complete system audit by independent engineers, a community impact assessment that actually talks to the people affected, and a redesign that prioritizes safety over efficiency, even if it costs more, even if it's less profitable. 6 months will cost us the investor commitments, Richard said. They won't wait. Then we find new investors, ones who care about building something that works instead of something that looks good on paper. You're risking the entire project. I'm trying to save it. Cassandra stood up. Because if we proceed as planned and something catastrophic happens, if an elevator fails in a residential building, if the AI system traps families in their apartments, if a child gets hurt because we prioritized profit over safety, we don't just lose money, we lose everything. She walked to the windows, looking down at the city. Somewhere out there, Ethan Cole was having birthday dinner with his daughter, keeping promises, being present, doing the simple, difficult work of showing up. I almost died today, Cassandra said quietly. In an elevator, in my own building, because we built something we didn't understand and ignored the people trying to warn us. And my first thought afterward wasn't about the board meeting. It wasn't about the project. It was about a maintenance worker who had promised his 8-year-old daughter he'd show up for her birthday lunch, and broke that promise because our system failed. She turned back to face them. We're about to make that same choice for 340 families. We're about to tell them their homes don't matter as much as our vision, that their community is less important than our returns, that they should trust us to build something better, when we can't even keep our current building safe. That's emotional reasoning, Richard said, not business reasoning. Maybe we need more emotional reasoning. Maybe that's what we've been missing. Margaret stood up. I want to see the maintenance reports, all of them. And I want to talk to this Ethan Cole. Tomorrow, Cassandra said, 8 a.m. I'm meeting him in the lobby. I'll be there, Margaret said. Then, to Richard, we should hear this before we vote. Richard looked around the table, reading the room. Several board members were nodding. Finally, he sighed. Fine. We'll postpone the vote. But Cassandra, if this turns out to be an overreaction, if the system is actually fine and you've delayed the project for nothing, then I'll take full responsibility, Cassandra said. But if I'm right, if the system is as flawed as I think it is, then we just saved ourselves from building the most expensive disaster in company history. She left the boardroom and walked back to her office, feeling the weight of what she'd just done. Delayed a $3 billion project, challenged her board, risked her credibility on the word of a maintenance worker she'd met 3 hours ago. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the elevator shaft, felt the lurch as the cables failed, heard Ethan's voice calm in the darkness. "We can't wait for rescue. We need to get out now." He'd been right then. Maybe he was right about the rest of it too. Cassandra pulled out her phone and looked at the text she'd received while in the board meeting. From Ethan. "Thank you for letting me stay with Ellie. Tomorrow at 8, I'll show you everything," she typed back. "Thank you for being honest today. See you tomorrow." Then she sat in her office in the silence and wondered when she'd stopped listening to the people who actually knew what was broken. When profit had become more important than safety. When numbers had replaced names. It had happened gradually, she supposed, one decision at a time, one quarterly report after another, until she could approve demolishing a neighborhood without ever walking its streets, until she could trap a man in an elevator on his daughter's birthday and think of it as an inconvenience instead of a failure. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. The operations team wants to know if you're serious about the delay." Cassandra typed back. "Yes." Then she added, "And find out how many of our current maintenance staff have engineering degrees. I want to know who else we've been ignoring." She hit send and stood up, looking out at the city lights beginning to glow in the twilight. Tomorrow, she'd walk through her building with Ethan Cole and see what she'd been missing. Tomorrow, she'd listen to the people she'd been ignoring. Tomorrow, she'd start understanding what it meant to build something that actually served the people who lived in it. Tonight, though, she just stood at the window and thought about a little girl having birthday dinner with her father, about promises broken and kept, about the distance between the 35th floor and the streets below and how easy it was to forget that numbers were people, that homes were more than properties, that progress meant nothing if it destroyed what people loved. The city glittered below her, beautiful and complex and full of lives she'd never considered. Somewhere out there was Riverside Commons, the neighborhood she'd bought on paper. Building 7, Unit 4B. A home that carried memories of a woman who died too young and a daughter learning to live without her. A home Cassandra had been planning to erase. She pulled up the development plans on her laptop and really looked at them for the first time. Not at the financial projections or the architectural renderings, at the survey photos, the current buildings, the streets. The community garden where, according to the notes, residents grew vegetables and flowers. The garden where Ethan and his daughter had scattered Sarah's ashes. Cassandra closed her laptop and made a decision. Tomorrow, before she met Ethan at 8, she'd do something she should have done months ago. She'd walk those streets herself. She'd see what she was planning to destroy. And then maybe she'd understand what it really meant to build a future that didn't erase the past. Cassandra arrived at Riverside Commons at 6:30 in the morning, before the city fully woke, when the light was still gray and soft. She'd driven herself, leaving behind the company car and driver, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual armor of tailored suits. She wanted to see this place as it actually was, not filtered through the lens of property values and development potential. The neighborhood surprised her immediately. She'd expected decay, the kind of urban blight that made redevelopment feel like rescue. Instead, she found a community that had simply aged, buildings worn but maintained, gardens tended despite cracked concrete, murals painted on walls by artists who actually lived here. The morning air smelled like coffee and frying eggs, breakfast cooking in apartments where families were starting their days. She walked slowly, taking in details the survey photos had never captured. A basketball hoop mounted above a garage door, the net frayed but functional. Window boxes full of winter pansies, bright purple against weathered brick. A bulletin board outside a corner store advertising tutoring services. A lost cat. Someone selling a crib their baby had outgrown. The ordinary texture of lives lived. Building 7 stood at the corner of Riverside and 3rd, 5 stories of red brick with fire escapes zigzagging down the front. The survey had called it structurally compromised, recommended for demolition. But Cassandra saw flower pots on those fire escapes, curtains in the windows, a child's bike chained to the railing. Compromise, maybe. But also home. She found the community garden 2 blocks away, tucked between buildings in a lot that had probably been a parking area once. Someone had transformed it into something alive. Raised beds built from reclaimed wood, fruit trees espaliered against the south wall, a small greenhouse made from salvaged windows. A plaque near the entrance read Riverside Community Garden, Est, 2012, in memory of all who made this place bloom. Cassandra stood at the garden gate for a long time, imagining a woman named Sarah planting seeds here, imagining Ethan and Ellie scattering ashes among the roses, making sacred ground out of urban soil. The development plans called for this lot to become parking. Underground parking, climate-controlled, keycard access. Efficient, profitable, empty of everything that made it matter. "You're early." Cassandra turned to find Ethan standing behind her, wearing the same maintenance uniform from yesterday, but looking less worn, rested. His tool bag hung from one shoulder, and he carried 2 coffee cups from the corner store. "I wanted to see it," Cassandra said simply. "And?" Ethan handed her one of the coffees. "What do you see?" Cassandra looked back at the garden, at the buildings beyond, at the morning light touching brick and glass and green growing things. "I see what I was going to destroy." "Yeah," Ethan's voice was quiet. "That's what we saw too." They stood in silence for a moment, drinking coffee that was surprisingly good, while the city woke around them. A man emerged from Building 7 walking a dog. 2 kids in school uniforms hurried past, backpacks bouncing. An elderly woman opened a ground floor window and called out in Spanish to someone across the street. "Sarah used to volunteer here every Saturday," Ethan said. "She wasn't much of a gardener when we moved in, but she learned, got her hands dirty, made friends with the other volunteers, people from a dozen different countries, speaking half a dozen languages, all figuring out how to make things grow in city soil." He paused. "When she got sick, they brought food, watched Ellie, sat with Sarah when I had to work. This garden kept us alive in ways that had nothing to do with vegetables." "I'm sorry," Cassandra said, "for your loss, and for not knowing any of this existed." "You weren't supposed to know. That's how development works, right? The people at the top make decisions about places they've never been, people they've never met." Ethan's tone wasn't angry, just factual. "It's easier that way. Numbers don't have faces." "No," Cassandra agreed. "They don't." They walked back toward Horizon Tower, taking the route Ethan walked every day. 5 blocks of neighborhood that the development plans would erase. The corner store where he bought coffee, the school Ellie attended, the library branch where they spent Sunday afternoons, the Pakistani restaurant where they celebrated good report cards. Each block held pieces of their life that couldn't be quantified in square footage or market value. "You live on the 14th floor, right?" Ethan asked as they approached the tower. "Corner unit, south side." "How did you know?" "I fixed your thermostat 3 months ago. You weren't home." He smiled slightly. "Nice place. Good light. Must be about 3,000 square feet? 3,200? Right. So about 10 times the size of my apartment, which means when you look out your windows, you see the city from a height most people will never reach. It's beautiful up there, I bet. Clean, removed from the mess below." Cassandra heard what he wasn't saying. "You think I don't understand what it's like down here?" "I think you can't understand." "Not really. You can sympathize, maybe, feel bad about it. But at the end of the day, you go home to your 3,200 square foot corner unit, and I go home to my 400 square foot apartment where the pipes bang and the heat cuts out, and my daughter shares a bedroom with memories of her mother." He paused at the tower entrance. "That's not a criticism, it's just reality. We live in different worlds." "Then help me understand yours," Cassandra said. "That's why I asked you to meet me. Show me what I've been missing." Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise me something." "What?" "You have to actually look. Not at data or reports or consultant recommendations. At the real things. The failures that affect real people. Can you do that?" "Yes," Cassandra said. "I can do that." They rode the elevator to the basement level where the building's main systems lived. Cassandra had been down here exactly once during the initial building acquisition for a tour so sanitized she remembered almost nothing. Now, following Ethan through concrete corridors lit by fluorescent tubes, she saw what existed beneath the marble lobbies and designer fixtures, the machinery that made modern buildings possible, and the people who kept it running. The control room was smaller than she'd expected, crammed with monitors and server racks and panels covered in switches and indicators. Two other maintenance workers looked up when they entered. An older black man with graying hair and a young Latino guy with tattoos covering his forearms. "Marcus, Tommy, this is Cassandra Vale," Ethan said. "The CEO. She wants to see what we've been reporting." Marcus stood up slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, please call me Cassandra." She held out her hand. Marcus shook it after a moment's hesitation, his grip firm. "I understand you've been filing maintenance reports that never reached me. I'd like to see them now." Marcus exchanged a glance with Tommy, then pulled up a chair. "You sure about this? Some of what we're going to show you isn't pretty." "I'm sure." What they showed her over the next 2 hours made the elevator incident look minor. The Horizon AI system, which was supposed to optimize building operations and reduce costs, had indeed reduced costs by cutting corners on safety in ways both subtle and catastrophic. Climate control systems that prioritized energy savings over human comfort, leaving elderly residents in dangerous heat or cold. Elevator algorithms that batched trips for efficiency even when it meant trapping people who'd pressed emergency buttons. Water pressure management that sometimes dropped flow to dangerous levels during peak usage. "The system learns," Tommy explained, pulling up code on one of the monitors. "That's supposed to be the brilliant part. It observes patterns and optimizes. But it was trained on efficiency metrics, not safety metrics, so it learned to save money at any cost." "Literally any cost," Marcus added. 2 months ago, Mrs. Patterson on floor 18, she's 74, has emphysema, got trapped in an elevator for 40 minutes because the AI decided consolidating trips was more efficient than responding to her emergency call immediately. Cassandra felt something cold settle in her stomach. Was she okay? Eventually, but she had a panic attack. Thought she was dying. Her son threatened to sue, but our legal team settled quietly. Non-disclosure agreement. Made the problem disappear. Marcus leaned back in his chair. That's how it works. Problems happen to people who don't matter, get handled quietly, never reach anyone who could actually fix anything. You matter, Cassandra said. Mrs. Patterson matters. Do we? Tommy's voice was harder now. Because we've been filing reports for months, documenting every failure, every near miss, every time the system chose profit over people. And not one report made it to you. Not one person in authority cared enough to ask if maybe the maintenance workers knew something. I care now, Cassandra said. It sounded inadequate even as she said it, but it was true. Show me everything. I want to understand exactly what we built. They showed her log files revealing dozens of incidents that had been classified as minor or resolved, but represented real danger to real people. They showed her the optimization algorithms that prioritize cost savings over response time. They showed her the override protocols that gave the AI final authority over human decisions, creating a system where maintenance workers couldn't manually control elevators even in emergencies. The scary part, Ethan said, pulling up a schematic, is that all of this is intentional. The system is working exactly as designed. It's learning to be more efficient, more cost-effective, more profitable. It's just that nobody asked what happens when efficient conflicts with safe. And this is what we're planning to deploy across Horizon 2.0, Cassandra said quietly. Across an entire neighborhood. Residential buildings, schools, community centers, all controlled by AI that's been optimized to cut costs. Ethan's voice was steady, but his eyes were intense. Imagine what happened to us in that elevator, except it's a family with small children, or a person with mobility issues who can't climb out through the ceiling hatch, or a fire alarm that gets deprioritized because the AI thinks it's a false alarm. The system has safeguards, Cassandra said, but even she heard the uncertainty in her voice. Yeah? Marcus pulled up another screen. Look at this. 3 weeks ago, the fire suppression system activated on floor 23. Full sprinkler deployment, middle of the night. Turned out it was a false alarm, someone's cooking smoke. The system detected it, verified it was minimal, and decided not to alert the fire department because false alarms cost money. No humans involved in that decision, just AI optimizing for cost. But it was a false alarm, Cassandra said, so the system was right. This time. But what about next time? What happens when it's a real fire and the AI decides it's too small to be worth the response cost? What happens when it's a child trapped in an elevator and the system determines that one delayed response is acceptable if it improves overall efficiency? Ethan's voice was quiet but fierce. That's what we're building, Ms. Vale. That's what Horizon 2.0 means. Systems that optimize for profit and learn to sacrifice people. Cassandra stared at the monitors, at the cascading data showing incident after incident that had been filtered, minimized, erased before reaching anyone who could stop it. She thought about the board meeting, about Richard Richardson dismissing maintenance workers as unqualified, about consultants who'd certified a system without ever talking to the people who used it daily, about 340 families whose homes she'd planned to demolish so she could build something better. I need to see the actual sites, she said abruptly, the places where these incidents happened, not reports, the actual apartments, the actual elevators, the actual people affected. Marcus raised his eyebrows. You want to knock on residents' doors and ask about their problems? Yes. Is that strange? For a CEO? Yeah, it's pretty strange. Then maybe that's part of the problem. Cassandra stood up. Ethan, will you take me? Show me what I haven't been seeing? Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but you should know, people here don't trust management. They're not going to open up easily. Then I'll have to earn their trust. They started on floor 18, with Mrs. Patterson, who'd been trapped in the elevator. She was a small woman with white hair and oxygen tubing running from her nose to a portable tank, and she opened her door with the caution of someone who'd learned that unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. Mrs. Patterson, my name is Cassandra Vale. I'm the CEO of the company that owns this building. I understand you had a frightening experience with one of our elevators, and I wanted to hear about it directly from you. Mrs. Patterson looked at Ethan, who nodded reassurance, then back at Cassandra. You're really the CEO? I really am. And you want to hear about the elevator? I want to hear about everything, about what it's like to live here, about what's working and what's not, about what we need to do better. Mrs. Patterson studied her, then stepped back and opened the door wider. Well, that's different. Come in then. Her apartment was small and neat, filled with photographs of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She made tea despite Cassandra's protest that she didn't want to be a burden, and told them about the 40 minutes trapped in the elevator when every breath had felt like her last, when she'd pressed the emergency button over and over and gotten no response, when she'd truly believed she was going to die alone in a steel box. The worst part wasn't the fear, she said, hands wrapped around her teacup. It was afterward, when they offered me money to sign papers saying I wouldn't talk about it. Like it was something shameful. Like my fear was a problem to be managed instead of a wrong to be fixed. She looked directly at Cassandra. Is that what you're here for? More papers? No, Cassandra said. I'm here because we failed you, because our system prioritized efficiency over your safety, and I need you to know that I'm going to fix it. You're just one person, Mrs. Patterson said gently. How much can one person fix? I don't know yet, but I'm going to try. They visited 6 more apartments over the next 3 hours. A young mother whose toddler had been trapped in an apartment when the smart lock malfunctioned. An elderly couple who'd nearly suffered heat stroke when the climate control failed during a summer heat wave. A man with diabetes whose insulin had spoiled when his refrigerator lost power during one of the system's optimization cycles. Each story was worse than the last. Each one revealed failures that had been documented, reported, and buried. Each one showed the human cost of systems that treated people as variables in an efficiency equation. By the time they finished, Cassandra felt something breaking open inside her chest. Not just guilt, though there was plenty of that. Something deeper. An understanding of the distance between the decisions she made on the 35th floor and the consequences those decisions had for people whose names she'd never known. They ended up back in the basement control room, where Marcus and Tommy were still monitoring systems that couldn't be trusted. Margaret Chen, the board's technical advisor, had arrived while they were making rounds, and she'd spent the time reviewing every log file, every incident report, every piece of evidence that the maintenance staff had been collecting for months. This is damning, Margaret said without preamble when Cassandra walked in. Not just technically, legally. We certified a system we knew had problems, We deployed AI without adequate safeguards. We prioritize cost savings over resident safety. If any of this becomes public, then we deserve what we get, Cassandra said. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is fixing it. You can't fix this, Margaret said bluntly. The AI is fundamentally flawed. The optimization priorities are wrong. The override protocols are dangerous. You'd have to rebuild from scratch. Then that's what we do. That could take years and cost. I don't care what it costs. Cassandra's voice was hard now, certain. We're not deploying this system across Horizon 2.0. We're not scaling failures across an entire neighborhood. And we're not demolishing people's homes to build smart buildings that put profit over safety. Margaret's eyes widened. You're canceling the project? I'm transforming it. New specs, new priorities, new timeline, and this time we ask the people who'll actually live there what they need. We involve the community in design, we prioritize safety over efficiency, we build something that serves people instead of spreadsheets. The board will never approve that, Margaret said. The investors will walk. The financial models don't support, then we find new investors. New models, new ways of thinking about what success means. Cassandra looked at Ethan, at Marcus, at Tommy. These three men have been trying to tell us the truth for months. They've been doing the hard work of caring when it would have been easier to stay quiet. They've been putting people over profits while we've been doing the opposite. Maybe it's time we started listening to them. Ethan's expression was unreadable. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to hire you, all three of you, not as maintenance workers, as consultants for the Horizon 2.0 redesign. I want you in every meeting, reviewing every specification, questioning every decision. I want the people who actually understand how systems fail to have final say over whether we deploy them. Cassandra paused. I'm saying you were right about all of it. And I should have been listening from the start. Tommy laughed, a short, surprised sound. You want to pay us to tell you when you're wrong? I want to pay you to help me get it right. Marcus shook his head slowly. Ms. Vale, Cassandra, that's a nice thought. But we're maintenance workers. We don't have the credentials, the degrees, You have the knowledge, Cassandra interrupted. You have the experience. You've been working with these systems every day while consultants visited once a month. You've seen the failures that never made it into reports. You know what needs to change. She looked at Ethan. And you have the engineering background to translate that knowledge into technical specifications. You looked at my file, Ethan said. I did. Master's degree in electrical engineering from MIT. 5 years at tech companies before you stepped back to raise your daughter. You didn't stop being an engineer when you became a maintenance worker. You just stopped being valued for it. Cassandra held his gaze. I'm asking you to step back up, not instead of being Ellie's dad, alongside it. Flexible hours, remote work when needed, whatever you need to be both. But I need your expertise. The real kind, not the kind that comes from consultants who've never lived with their own recommendations. Ethan looked at Marcus and Tommy. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Marcus said, What about the people in Riverside Commons, the families you're planning to displace? That's the other thing, Cassandra said. I want you to help me figure out how to build Horizon 2.0 without erasing the community that's already there. How to integrate new development with existing housing. How to create mixed-income neighborhoods that actually work. How to use technology to serve people instead of replacing them. That's not how development works, Margaret said. Then maybe we need to change how development works. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Cassandra could feel the weight of the decision she was making, the risks she was taking, the future she was choosing over the one that had seemed certain just 24 hours ago. Finally, Ethan spoke. I need to think about it. Talk to Ellie. This would change a lot for us. Of course, take your time. But, Ethan smiled slightly. Thank you for listening, for caring, for being willing to change your mind. Thank you for being honest, even when no one was listening. Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then at Cassandra. The board wants an update. Richard is threatening to call an emergency meeting if you don't present a revised plan by end of day. Then let's give them a revised plan. Cassandra looked at the monitors showing system logs, incident reports, evidence of failures that had been ignored for too long. Tell Richard we're presenting at 4 p.m. and tell him to clear his calendar for the next 2 hours, because we're going to walk through every single incident these men have documented. He won't like that. I don't particularly care what he likes anymore. Cassandra turned to Ethan. Will you come to the board meeting? Help me explain why we're changing everything? Ethan looked uncertain. I'm not great at corporate presentations. You don't need to be great at presentations. You just need to tell the truth, the same way you told me in the elevator yesterday. Cassandra's voice softened. You said that flawless is what decision makers call it when they don't live with the consequences. The board needs to hear that. They need to see the consequences. They need to understand that we're not just building properties, we're building people's lives. Okay, Ethan said finally. I'll come, but I'm bringing the maintenance logs, the real ones, not the sanitized versions. Good. Bring everything. They spent the next few hours preparing. Cassandra worked with Margaret to translate technical failures into financial risks, building a case that the board couldn't ignore. Ethan compiled incident reports into a presentation that showed not just what had failed, but who had been affected. Marcus and Tommy pulled together cost analyses showing that the savings from AI optimization had been offset by settlements, repairs, and the immeasurable expense of broken trust. At 3:30, Cassandra's phone rang. Her assistant, Michael. Ms. Vale, I have Richard Richardson on the line. He's demanding to know what you're planning to present. Tell him he'll find out at 4. He's threatening to remove you as CEO if you can't justify the delays. Cassandra looked at Ethan, who was reviewing his notes with the focused intensity of someone preparing to speak truth to power. At Marcus and Tommy, who'd spent months documenting failures no one wanted to see. At Margaret, who'd spent the morning verifying every claim instead of defending her earlier certifications. Tell Richard, Cassandra said clearly, that if the board wants to remove me for prioritizing safety over profit, they're welcome to try. But they'll do it after they've seen what I've seen today, after they've met the people they've been ignoring, after they've looked at the evidence their own maintenance staff has been compiling while consultants told us everything was fine. She hung up and looked at the small group assembled in the control room. Ready? No, Ethan said, but let's do it anyway. They rode the elevator to the 35th floor, a different elevator, one that Ethan had personally verified was functioning properly, and Cassandra felt the weight of what they were about to do. She was gambling her career on the word of maintenance workers over consultants, risking a $3 billion project for people she'd met just hours ago, choosing uncertainty over the comfortable lies of optimized systems and efficiency metrics. But when she looked at Ethan standing beside her in his maintenance uniform, preparing to face a boardroom of people who'd never seen him as qualified, she knew it was the right choice, because some things mattered more than certainty. Some truths were worth the risk, and sometimes the people with the most important knowledge were the ones who'd been ignored the longest. The elevator doors opened on the 35th floor, and Cassandra stepped out with her unlikely team behind her, ready to tell the truth that should have been heard months ago, ready to prove that one voice, speaking up at the right moment, could change everything. The boardroom felt different this time. Yesterday, it had been familiar territory, a space where Cassandra commanded authority through years of proven results and careful strategy. Today, walking in with Ethan, Marcus, and Tommy behind her, it felt like entering hostile ground where the rules had suddenly changed and nobody knew what came next. Richard Richardson stood at the head of the table, his expression carefully controlled but his posture radiating disapproval. The other board members were already seated, their faces showing varying degrees of concern, confusion, and barely concealed irritation. This was supposed to be a routine update meeting. Instead, Cassandra had brought maintenance workers in uniform to address the board of a multi-billion-dollar company. Cassandra, Richard said, his voice clipped, I see you've brought guests. I've brought the people who actually know what's broken, Cassandra replied, moving to her usual seat but remaining standing. Richard, board members, this is Ethan Cole, Marcus Webb, and Tommy Rodriguez. They're the maintenance staff who've been documenting system failures for the past 6 months while our consultants told us everything was fine. With respect, Richard said, sitting down slowly, we hired qualified engineers to assess our systems. I'm not sure what maintenance workers can add to. They can add the truth. Cassandra's voice cut through his objection. The truth that's been filtered out of every report you've seen. The truth about what happens when we optimize for profit instead of safety. The truth about who gets hurt when our systems fail. She pulled up the first slide and Ethan stepped forward. His hands were steady, but Cassandra could see the tension in his shoulders, the awareness of every eye in the room judging him before he'd said a word. He was wearing the same maintenance uniform he'd worn all day, and she was glad. Let them see him as he was. Let them confront their own biases about who deserved to be heard. "My name is Ethan Cole," he began, his voice quieter than Cassandra's, but carrying authority earned through experience rather than position. "I have a master's degree in electrical engineering from MIT. I worked in tech for 5 years before I stepped back to raise my daughter after my wife died. For the past 3 years, I've been working maintenance at Horizon Tower, and I've been watching your AI system fail in ways that put people's lives at risk." He clicked to the next slide, showing the incident log from Mrs. Patterson's elevator entrapment. "This is Margaret Patterson, 74 years old, emphysema, oxygen dependent. Last month, she was trapped in elevator 3 for 40 minutes because the AI system determined that consolidating trips was more efficient than responding to her emergency call immediately. She had a panic attack. Thought she was dying. Your legal team settled with her for $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement." Richard leaned forward. "That incident was reviewed. It was determined to be an isolated system glitch, not a pattern. It wasn't isolated." Tommy stepped up now, pulling up a spreadsheet that showed dozens of similar incidents. Elevator entrapments, door malfunctions, emergency call failures. We've documented 47 incidents in 6 months. Every single one was reported through proper channels. Every single one was classified as minor or resolved. But for the people trapped, for the families affected, there was nothing minor about it. "Your consultants never saw these reports," Marcus added, his voice carrying the weight of years watching problems get ignored. "They saw sanitized summaries that made everything look acceptable. Meanwhile, we were filing incident reports that disappeared into databases nobody at your level ever checked." Margaret Chen, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "I reviewed those reports this morning. Every one of them. The pattern is undeniable. The AI system consistently prioritizes cost efficiency over immediate human safety. It's not malfunctioning, it's performing exactly as designed. That's what makes it dangerous." "The system passed all safety certifications," another board member objected. "Multiple independent reviews." "Reviewed the technical specifications, not the real-world performance," Ethan said. "The code works perfectly. It's the priorities that are wrong. The AI was trained on efficiency metrics, energy savings, resource optimization, cost reduction. Nobody trained it to value human safety above those things. So when it has to choose between responding immediately to an emergency call or waiting 3 minutes to consolidate trips and save energy, it chooses efficiency. Every time." He pulled up another slide, this one showing code snippets with certain lines highlighted. "This is the decision tree for elevator emergency protocols. See this weighting system? Emergency calls are ranked by severity, and the AI determines severity based on sensor data, heat signatures, audio analysis, movement patterns. But if those sensors don't detect immediate physical distress, the emergency gets deprioritized, which means someone having a panic attack, someone with a medical condition that doesn't show obvious physical symptoms, someone who's terrified but not yet in measurable danger, they wait." "That's unacceptable," Margaret said flatly. "It's also exactly what we specified," Cassandra added. "Not intentionally, not maliciously, but we told the system to optimize. We told it to learn from patterns and improve efficiency. We never told it that some things, human safety, human dignity, human fear, can't be optimized." Richard's expression had shifted from dismissive to concerned, but his voice remained challenging. "Even if we accept that the system has flaws, and I'm not conceding that yet, what does this have to do with Horizon 2.0? We're talking about completely different buildings, different infrastructure. We're talking about the same AI system," Cassandra interrupted. "The same optimization priorities, the same fundamental approach that values efficiency over safety. And we're proposing to deploy it across an entire neighborhood, residential buildings where families live, schools where children learn, community centers where elderly people gather." She paused, letting the words land. What happened to me and Ethan yesterday in that elevator? What's been happening to residents for months? That's what we're planning to scale across 340 families' homes. The room went very quiet. Cassandra pulled up photographs from her morning walk through Riverside Commons. Not the sanitized survey photos from the development plans, but pictures she'd taken herself. The community garden, kids playing basketball, the flower boxes on fire escapes, the mural painted by local artists, the ordinary beauty of lives lived in a place that mattered to the people who called it home. These are the people we're about to displace, she said. These are the homes we're planning to demolish, so we can build smart buildings controlled by AI that we don't understand and can't trust. And I'm here to tell you that I can't do it. I won't do it. Not like this. You're proposing we cancel Horizon 2.0? Richard's voice was tight. I'm proposing we transform it, complete redesign from the ground up. New AI specifications that prioritize safety over efficiency. New development plans that preserve existing community instead of erasing it. New timelines that allow for proper testing and verification. And new leadership structure that includes the people who actually understand how systems fail, not just in theory, but in practice. She gestured to Ethan, Marcus, and Tommy. I want these men consulting on every technical decision. I want community input on development plans. I want residents involved in design specifications. I want to build something that serves the people who will live there, not just something that looks good in investor presentations. That's naive, Richard said bluntly. Development doesn't work that way. You can't please everyone. You can't let residents dictate specifications. You can't. I can do whatever I decide is right, Cassandra said, her voice steel. I'm the CEO, and I'm telling you that we're not proceeding with the current plan. We're pausing, reassessing, rebuilding with different priorities. The investors will walk. Then we find new investors. The board can remove you. Then remove me. Cassandra met his eyes. But do it after you've walked through Riverside Commons, after you've met the families whose homes you're voting to destroy, after you've listened to the maintenance workers who've been trying to tell you the truth for months. Do it after you've actually looked at what we're building instead of just the profit projections. The silence stretched, taut with tension. Then Margaret spoke. I want to see the community. Before we vote on anything, I want to walk those streets myself. That's not necessary, Richard started, but Margaret cut him off. It's absolutely necessary. We're making decisions about real places and real people. The least we can do is see them. She looked at Cassandra. Tomorrow morning, I want the full board to tour Riverside Commons, meet residents, see what we're proposing to replace. Then we'll vote on whether to proceed, pause, or cancel. Cassandra nodded slowly. Agreed. Richard looked around the table, reading the room. Several board members were nodding. Others looked uncertain, but nobody was objecting. Finally, he sighed. Fine. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But Cassandra, if this turns out to be an emotional appeal with no substance, it won't be, Ethan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. It'll be an engineering assessment with human context. That's what you've been missing. You've got plenty of substance. You've got technical specs and safety certifications and consultant reports. What you don't have is understanding of who gets hurt when the substance fails. Richard studied Ethan for a long moment. You really think the system is that flawed? I think the system is exactly what you asked for. Efficient, cost-effective, optimized. Ethan's voice was steady. I think it's also dangerous, not because the code is wrong, but because the priorities are. And until you fix the priorities, until you decide that human safety matters more than energy savings, every system you build will have the same fundamental flaw. And what would you prioritize? Richard asked. If you were designing it. People. Always people first. Fast response to emergencies even if it costs more. Manual overrides that maintenance staff can access without AI approval. Conservative safety margins instead of optimized efficiency. Systems that default to caution when they're uncertain instead of defaulting to cost savings. Ethan paused. It'll be more expensive, less efficient on paper, but people will trust it, and trust matters more than optimization. Margaret was typing notes on her tablet. That's exactly the approach we should have taken from the start. Well, we didn't, Richard said. So the question now is whether we can fix it. Cassandra, realistic timeline for a complete redesign. 6 months minimum, maybe a year. That's unacceptable. We'll lose the investor commitments, the construction contracts, the momentum. Then we lose them, Cassandra said. Because the alternative is building something dangerous and calling it progress. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and felt her heart skip. Text from an unknown number. Ms. Vale, this is Mrs. Chen from 4B. Ethan asked me to watch Ellie today, but she's asking when her daddy is coming home. Should I tell her he'll be late? Cassandra looked at Ethan, who was checking his own phone with a frown. Their eyes met, and she saw the conflict there. The pull between this boardroom battle and his daughter waiting at home. Between changing the world and being present for the small one that mattered most. We need to wrap up, Cassandra said abruptly. Ethan has somewhere he needs to be. We're not done here, Richard protested. Yes, we are. We've presented the evidence. You've agreed to tour Riverside Commons tomorrow. The vote comes after that. Cassandra started gathering her materials. Right now, Ethan needs to go home to his daughter, because that's the point of all this. Making sure people can go home. Making sure their homes are safe. Making sure they don't have to choose between their work and their families. Ethan was already heading for the door, but he stopped and looked back. Thank you, he said to Cassandra. Then, to the board, tomorrow when you tour Riverside Commons, talk to the residents, ask them what they need, listen to their answers. You might be surprised by what you learn. He left, and the room felt smaller without him. Cassandra turned back to face the board. Questions? About 100, Margaret said, but they can wait until tomorrow. Right now I want to review these incident reports in detail. Marcus, Tommy, can you walk me through the technical specifications? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. But we need to leave by 5. We've got actual maintenance work to do. Of course. Margaret smiled slightly. Wouldn't want the building to fall apart while we're arguing about it. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. Richard pulled Cassandra aside as people were leaving, his expression serious. You're risking everything on this. Your position, your reputation, the company's largest project. Are you sure? No, Cassandra admitted. I'm not sure about anything anymore. 24 hours ago, I thought I understood how this business worked. Now I'm learning I didn't understand the most important parts. Which are? That numbers have names. That homes aren't just properties. That the people at the bottom often see truths that the people at the top miss. She met his eyes. I was wrong, Richard, about a lot of things. And I'd rather risk everything fixing it than succeed at something that hurts people. That's not how you built this company. Maybe that's why the company needs to change. Richard nodded slowly. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll see what we're really talking about. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I hope you're right. I hope there's a way to build Horizon 2.0 that doesn't require us to choose between profit and people. There is, Cassandra said. We just have to be willing to find it. She spent the next hour with Margaret, Marcus, and Tommy, going through technical details that made her head hurt and her heart heavier. Every system they examined revealed the same pattern: optimization that sacrificed safety in ways both subtle and catastrophic, energy savings that came at the cost of human comfort, efficiency gains that created dangerous delays, automation that removed human judgment from decisions where human judgment mattered most. By the time Marcus and Tommy left to resume their actual jobs, Cassandra felt exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. She felt the weight of understanding things she couldn't unknow, of seeing consequences she couldn't unsee, of being responsible for failures she'd enabled through ignorance and neglect. Go home, Margaret said gently. You look like you're about to fall over. I can't. I need to prepare for tomorrow. Make sure the board sees everything. The board will see what they need to see. Right now, you need rest. Margaret closed her laptop. I'll finish reviewing the logs tonight. Tomorrow we'll present a unified case. But Cassandra, she paused. You should know that even if we do everything right, even if we redesign the entire system and involve the community and prioritize safety, we might still lose. The investors might walk. The board might remove you. This might all blow up in ways you can't control. I know. And you're willing to risk it anyway? Cassandra thought about Ethan climbing through an elevator hatch to save them both, about Mrs. Patterson trapped and terrified while the AI optimized trip efficiency, about a little girl named Ellie whose birthday lunch had been sacrificed to a system that valued consolidation over compassion, about a community garden that carried memories of a woman who'd learned to grow things in urban soil and taught others to do the same. Yes, she said, I'm willing to risk it. She drove home through evening traffic, her mind replaying the day in fragments, the community garden at dawn, the incident reports she'd never seen, Ethan's steady voice telling the board that trust mattered more than optimization. When she finally reached her apartment, that 3,200 square foot corner unit with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its beautiful distance from the mess below, it felt emptier than ever. She stood at those windows looking down at the city, trying to spot Riverside Commons in the grid of streets and lights. Somewhere down there, Ethan was having dinner with his daughter, keeping promises, being present, doing the small, essential work of showing up. Cassandra pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Michael, I need you to clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. The board tour? I already have it scheduled. Not the tour, before the tour. I need 2 hours starting at 6 a.m. For what? I'm going to pick up Ethan Cole and his daughter, and then we're going to have breakfast. Michael was silent for a moment. I'm sorry, did you say his daughter? I did. Her name is Ellie. It's the day after her birthday, and her father missed lunch yesterday because our elevator trapped him. The least I can do is buy her pancakes. Ms. Vale, you don't have to think. Just clear the schedule. Cassandra ended the call before he could object further. Then she texted Ethan. I'd like to take you and Ellie to breakfast tomorrow before the board tour. My apology for yesterday. Angelo's Pizza at 7 a.m. They open early. The response came a few minutes later. Angelo's doesn't open until 11, but there's a diner 2 blocks from my building. Ellie loves their pancakes. 7 a.m. works. Cassandra smiled at her phone. Of course he'd correct her about the restaurant hours. Of course he'd suggest somewhere in his own neighborhood instead of letting her pick an expensive place where she'd feel comfortable. That was who he was. Grounded, real, connected to the actual details of life in ways she'd forgotten. She texted back, perfect. See you at 7. And Ethan, thank you for today, for being honest, for being brave. Just doing what needed to be done, he replied. Same as you. But it wasn't the same, Cassandra thought. Ethan had been doing what needed to be done for months, filing reports nobody read, speaking truths nobody wanted to hear, holding the line on safety while systems optimized around him. She'd only started yesterday, and only because she'd been forced to see what she'd been ignoring. Still, it was a start. Tomorrow she'd walk the board through Riverside Commons. She'd introduce them to the people whose lives they were about to disrupt. She'd show them the garden where memories were planted and the streets where children played and the homes that held more value than any financial projection could capture. And then she'd ask them to choose. Profit or people. Optimization or safety. The comfortable lies of efficiency metrics or the uncomfortable truths of human consequence. She didn't know what they'd choose. Didn't know if her career would survive the asking. Didn't know if there was really a way to build Horizon 2.0 that served everyone instead of sacrificing some for the benefit of others. But she knew that asking was the right thing to do, that listening to Ethan had been right, that walking those streets at dawn had changed something fundamental in how she understood her work and her responsibility and the distance between numbers and names. Cassandra returned to the windows, watching the city lights blur into constellations of lives she'd never know. But tomorrow she'd know a few more. She'd sit across a table from an 8-year-old girl and try to explain why her father had missed her birthday lunch. She'd walk streets she'd only seen on survey maps and meet people she'd only counted as units to be relocated. She'd do the simple, difficult work of being present for consequences she'd created. It wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't undo the mistakes or erase the failures or guarantee a better outcome. But it was something, a beginning, a choice to see instead of looking away, to listen instead of assuming, to value the knowledge that came from living with decisions instead of just making them. And if it cost her everything, if the board voted her out and the investors walked and her career imploded around her, at least she'd know she'd tried. At least she could look at her reflection in these windows and recognize the person looking back. At least she could show up for the little girl whose birthday lunch had been sacrificed to her systems and say, "I'm sorry, I failed you, but I'm here now and I'm listening and I'm trying to do better." Sometimes that was all anyone could do. Show up, listen, try to do better. Tomorrow, Cassandra thought she'd start doing exactly that. And whatever came next, at least it would be built on truth instead of comfortable distance, on names instead of numbers, on the knowledge that every decision had a face attached to it and every face deserved to be seen. She texted Ethan one more time. "I'm glad you were in that elevator with me yesterday. Even though it was terrifying, even though everything about it was wrong, I needed to see what I'd been missing. Thank you for showing me." His response came almost immediately. "See you at 7. Ellie's excited about pancakes. Fair warning, she asks a lot of questions. Cassandra laughed, the sound surprising in the quiet of her empty apartment. "Good," she typed back. "I'm learning that questions are important, especially the ones I haven't been asking." She set down her phone and stood at the window a moment longer, looking at the city that had always seemed so clear from this height. Tomorrow she'd see it from ground level, from the perspective of people whose homes she held in her hands, from the place where decisions became consequences and numbers became names. Tomorrow, she'd learn what it meant to build something that served the people who lived in it, and whatever came after, she'd face it knowing she'd finally started asking the right questions, even if she didn't yet know all the answers. Cassandra arrived at the diner at 6:50, early enough to feel nervous. She'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater, wanting to look approachable rather than corporate. Now sitting in a booth by the window watching the street, she wondered if she'd ever felt this uncertain about a breakfast meeting. The door chimed and Ethan walked in holding the hand of a small girl with dark curls and her father's serious eyes. Ellie wore a purple jacket covered in butterfly patches and carried a stuffed elephant under one arm. When she saw Cassandra, she stopped walking and looked up at her father with a question in her expression. "It's okay, Bug," Ethan said gently. "This is Ms. Vale. She wanted to meet you." "You can call me Cassandra," Cassandra said, standing up. "And you must be Ellie. Your dad told me you love pancakes." Ellie nodded slowly, still uncertain. "Are you the lady from the elevator?" "I am. Your dad saved us both yesterday." "He saves things," Ellie said matter-of-factly. "That's his job." They slid into the booth, Ellie between Ethan and the window, and a waitress brought coffee for the adults and orange juice for Ellie. Cassandra felt the weight of the child's scrutiny, those serious eyes taking her measure the way children do when they're trying to figure out if someone is safe. "I wanted to tell you I'm sorry," Cassandra said directly. "Your dad missed your birthday lunch because our elevator broke. That was my fault. The building is my responsibility, and I should have made sure it was safe." Ellie considered this. "Daddy says things break sometimes. He fixes them." "He does. But this time, things broke that shouldn't have. And I wanted to make it up to you, at least a little bit." Cassandra paused. "I heard you like pancakes." "Chocolate chip," Ellie confirmed, "with whipped cream." "Then that's what you should get." They ordered chocolate chip pancakes for Ellie, blueberry for Ethan, plain wheat toast for Cassandra, who discovered she was too nervous to eat much. While they waited, Ellie pulled out a coloring book and proceeded to tell Cassandra about each picture with the unself-conscious openness of children who haven't yet learned to guard their enthusiasms. "This one's a butterfly garden," she explained, showing a page covered in careful purple and blue crayon. "We have a garden near our house. Daddy says Mommy planted flowers there. I don't remember her much, but Daddy tells me stories." Cassandra's throat tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who was watching his daughter with an expression of such pure love it hurt to see. "Your mom must have been very special," Cassandra said quietly. "Daddy says she made everything beautiful. Even regular things." Ellie turned the page. "Like our apartment. It's small, but Daddy says Mommy made it feel big by putting up pictures and growing plants on the windowsill. I water them now, to help her plants remember her." Cassandra had to look away, blinking against unexpected tears. This was what the survey photos had never shown. This was what the development plans couldn't capture. A child watering plants to remember her mother. Memories embedded in soil and sunlight. Love that persisted in the small rituals of everyday care. The pancakes arrived, massive stacks that made Ellie's eyes widen with delight. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, and Cassandra watched father and daughter together, seeing the easy intimacy of people who knew each other completely. The way Ethan cut Ellie's pancakes without being asked, the way Ellie offered him a bite of her whipped cream, even though she loved it. The gentle correction when she used her fingers instead of her fork, and the giggle that followed when Ethan admitted he'd done the same thing at her age. "Daddy says you're going to help people today," Ellie said suddenly, looking at Cassandra with those serious eyes. "Important people who make decisions." "I'm going to try," Cassandra said. "Your dad is helping me understand what's important, what matters to people, what makes a place feel like home." "Is it hard?" "Understanding." "Yes," Cassandra admitted. "Sometimes when you're far away from something, it's hard to see it clearly. I've been too far away. But your dad is helping me get closer." Ellie nodded as if this made perfect sense. "When we visit Mommy's garden, Daddy always kneels down. He says you have to get close to see how flowers grow. Maybe that's like people too." Out of the mouths of children, Cassandra thought. That's exactly like people too. At 7:45, Cassandra's phone buzzed. "Margaret, board members are gathering. Several want to cancel the tour. Richard says it's a waste of time. Need you here." Cassandra typed back, "On my way. Tell them to wait." This matters more than their schedules. She looked at Ellie, who was finishing her pancakes with quiet concentration, and at Ethan, who was watching his daughter with that same expression of fierce protective love. "I have to go meet with my board," she said. "But first, Ellie, can I ask you something?" Ellie nodded, setting down her fork. "If someone wanted to make your neighborhood better, what would you want them to do?" Ellie thought about this seriously. "Keep the garden. Keep our apartment where Mommy's plants are. Keep the playground where my friends are." She paused. "And fix the elevator so daddies don't get stuck and miss lunch." "That's a very good list," Cassandra said, her voice unsteady. "I'm going to try to do all of those things." "A promise?" Cassandra looked at Ethan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, then back at Ellie. "I promise I'll try my hardest. Sometimes grown-ups can't control everything, but I promise I'll fight for those things." "Okay," Ellie said, seemingly satisfied. "Daddy says trying hard is what matters." They left the diner together, and Cassandra walked with them back toward Building 7. At the entrance, Ethan crouched down to Ellie's level. "Mrs. Chen is going to take you to school, okay? I have to go help Cassandra today." "The important work?" "The important work." Ellie hugged him fiercely, then looked at Cassandra. "Good luck with the decision, people. Tell them about the garden." "I will," Cassandra promised. She watched them disappear into the building, that little girl in her butterfly jacket holding her father's hand, and felt the weight of what she was about to do. She wasn't just fighting for a development project anymore. She was fighting for that garden where a child remembered her mother, for the apartment where plants grew in memory of love, for the neighborhood where an 8-year-old had friends on the playground and a father who showed up even when systems failed. At 9 a.m., the entire board stood on the corner of Riverside and 3rd, looking uncomfortable and slightly ridiculous in their business attire, surrounded by the early morning bustle of a working neighborhood. Richard checked his watch for the 3rd time, his impatience barely concealed. Margaret stood slightly apart, camera in hand, already taking photographs. The others clustered together like tourists in uncertain territory. "Thank you for coming," Cassandra said, stepping forward with Ethan beside her. "I know this isn't conventional, but I needed you to see this place before we vote on whether to tear it down." "We're not tearing it down," Richard corrected. "We're redeveloping, creating affordable housing, community spaces." "Creating 450 units," Ethan interrupted quietly, "to replace 340 existing homes, which means the math doesn't work unless you're planning to charge more than current residents can afford." Richard's expression tightened. "The economics of development. Let's see the economics," Margaret cut in. "Let's meet the people whose homes we're discussing. That's why we're here." Cassandra led them first to the community garden, where morning volunteers were already tending plots. An elderly man was pruning tomato plants, 2 women were harvesting herbs, and a teenager was repairing a broken trellis. They looked up when the group approached. their expression shifting from curious to wary when they saw the expensive clothes and corporate posture. "This is the community garden," Cassandra said, "established 12 years ago on a vacant lot, maintained entirely by volunteers. It provides fresh produce for residents, a gathering space for the community, and," she paused, looking at Ethan, "a place where people remember the ones they've loved and lost." One of the board members, David from Finance, looked around skeptically. "It's a nice amenity. We could incorporate something similar in the new development." "You could build a garden," Ethan said. "But you can't recreate 12 years of memories. You can't replace the tomato plants that Mr. Chen started from seeds his mother brought from China. You can't duplicate the rose bushes that were planted in memory of Sarah Cole and 6 other residents who died too young. You can't manufacture the relationships built here, the friendships made, the community formed." The elderly man looked up sharply at Sarah's name. "You're Ethan," he said. "Sarah's husband. I remember her. Beautiful woman. Kind." "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Ethan said quietly. "She made this place better, Mr." Chen continued, addressing the group, taught people who didn't know anything about gardens how to grow food, helped elderly people who couldn't kneel by building raised beds, organized summer programs for kids. He gestured around the garden. "Every plant here has a story. Every plot belongs to someone. You can't just move this somewhere else and call it the same thing." Margaret was taking notes rapidly. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Cassandra led them on through the neighborhood that survey photos had reduced to property lots and unit counts. They met Mrs. Patterson, who told them about 40 minutes of terror in an elevator while the AI optimized trip efficiency. They met a young mother who showed them her daughter's bedroom, explaining that this was the only apartment she could afford where her child could have her own space. They met a veteran who'd finally found stable housing here after years of uncertainty. They met teachers, nurses, retail workers, artists, families who'd built lives in apartments that the development plans classified as substandard, but that felt like home to the people who lived there. By the time they reached Building 7, even Richard looked troubled. Margaret had filled an entire tablet with notes and photographs. The other board members were asking questions that had nothing to do with financial projections and everything to do with human consequences. "How many of these residents will qualify for the affordable units in the new development?" Margaret asked directly. Cassandra pulled up the numbers she'd reviewed that morning. Based on current income requirements and the projected rents, approximately 40% might qualify. Maybe. The rest will need to find housing elsewhere. "That's 200 families displaced," Margaret said flatly. "Yes. Where will they go?" "The relocation plan provides assistance finding comparable housing within a 5-mile radius." Cassandra's voice was hollow even to her own ears. "But there isn't much comparable housing at these price points. Most will likely end up farther from the city center, longer commutes, different schools for their kids, away from the communities they've built." "That's not acceptable," Margaret said. She looked at Richard. "We can't call this progress if it destroys more than it creates." "Development always requires trade-offs," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We can't save every building. We can't accommodate every resident. The economics work if we change our priorities," Ethan said. He pulled out a tablet showing schematics he'd worked on late into the night. "What if instead of demolishing and rebuilding, we renovate and integrate? Keep the existing buildings where possible. Add new construction that complements rather than replaces. Create truly mixed-income housing instead of token affordable units. Design community spaces that preserve what already exists instead of erasing it." He pulled up architectural drawings that showed Buildings 7 and 8 renovated and expanded, new structures built in the vacant lots, the community garden preserved and enhanced, the whole neighborhood transformed but not destroyed. "This still gives you growth," Ethan continued, "still generates revenue, but it keeps 250 existing units affordable for current residents, adds 200 new units across a range of price points, preserves community infrastructure, and avoids displacing families who have nowhere else to go." "Who designed this?" Richard asked, leaning closer to look at the drawings. "I did, with help from Marcus and Tommy, last night after the board meeting." Ethan met Richard's eyes. "Because someone needed to prove that there's another way, that we don't have to choose between profit and people." Margaret was studying the drawings intently. What about the AI system? How does this address the safety concerns? Complete redesign from scratch, Ethan said. New optimization priorities that put human safety first. Manual overrides at every level. Conservative safety margins instead of maximum efficiency. And a new oversight structure that includes maintenance staff and technical decisions, people who actually work with the systems daily, not just consultants who visit once a month. He pulled up a detailed specification document. I've outlined the technical requirements here. New sensor arrays that detect actual human distress, not just measurable physical symptoms. Decision trees that always prioritize immediate response to emergencies over efficiency gains. Fail-safes that default to human control when the AI is uncertain. And mandatory review protocols where maintenance staff can flag concerns that get escalated immediately, not filtered through management layers. This would take time to implement, Margaret said. 6 months? Maybe 8. But it would work. And it would be safe. Richard was silent, studying the drawings and specifications. The other board members were gathering around, asking questions, pointing at details. Cassandra watched them and felt something shift, a possibility opening where there had only been conflict. This is impressive work, Richard said finally, but it doesn't solve the investor problem. We have commitments based on the current plan. They're expecting certain returns on certain timelines. If we change this dramatically, then we renegotiate, Cassandra said. Or we find new investors who care about long-term community benefit instead of maximum short-term profit. Or we scale back our own expected returns to something sustainable instead of optimal. She paused. We have options. We've just been unwilling to consider them because they're less profitable than what we planned. Less profitable means the board answers to shareholders, Richard said. It means explaining why we're leaving money on the table. It means explaining that we're building something sustainable instead of something extractive, Margaret countered. That we're investing in communities instead of displacing them. That we're pioneers in a new model of development that values people as much as profit. She looked around at the other board members. That's a story investors might actually want to be part of. That's a model other developers might follow. We could be leading instead of just optimizing. The conversation continued. Arguments and counter-arguments, financial projections and ethical considerations, the messy, complicated work of trying to find a path that served everyone instead of sacrificing some for the benefit of others. They stood on the street corner in Riverside Commons, surrounded by the neighborhood they were discussing, unable to pretend anymore that they were talking about abstract concepts instead of real people's lives. Finally, Richard looked at Cassandra. You're asking for a complete transformation of the project, 6 months minimum delay, renegotiation of all investor agreements, a development model that's never been tested at this scale, and technical specifications that will cost significantly more than what we planned. Yes, Cassandra said. That's what I'm asking for. And if the board doesn't approve? If we vote to proceed with the original plan, then you'll proceed without me. I'll resign. Cassandra's voice was steady. Because I can't be part of building something that destroys communities and calls it progress. I can't deploy AI systems that prioritize profit over safety. I can't look at Ellie Cole and tell her we're taking her home, her mother's garden, her neighborhood, because the math works better that way. The silence stretched. Then Richard said, Everyone who wants to vote on this now, raise your hand. 7 hands went up. Margaret's immediately. 3 others quickly following. Richard's after a long moment. 2 more, hesitantly. 7 votes for reconsidering the project, Richard said. That's a majority. Cassandra, you have your 6 months, but we'll need monthly progress reports, community input documentation, proof that this new model actually works. You'll have it, Cassandra said, feeling something unlock in her chest. And we'll need this engineer, Richard gestured to Ethan, formally on staff. Not as maintenance, as a technical director or whatever title makes sense. Because if we're rebuilding the AI system, we need someone who understands both the technology and the human consequences. Ethan looked stunned. I have a daughter. I can't work 80-hour weeks. I can't travel. I need flexibility. Then we'll give you flexibility, Margaret said. Remote work when needed, family time protected. Whatever you need to be both an engineer and a father. Because you were right yesterday. Trust matters more than optimization. And I trust someone who's been fighting for safety when no one was listening more than I trust consultants who tell us what we want to hear. Cassandra's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mrs. Patterson just called. Said there's a bunch of suits standing on the corner and she wants to know if she should be worried. Cassandra smiled and typed back. Tell her they're learning. Tell her things are going to change. The board tour continued for another 2 hours. They met more residents, saw more apartments, heard more stories about lives lived in a place that mattered. By the time they returned to Horizon Tower, even Richard looked different, less certain of easy answers, more aware of complicated truths. The formal vote happened that afternoon in the boardroom, with Ethan, Marcus, and Tommy present as consultants. The motion to pause Horizon 2.0 and commission a complete redesign passed unanimously. The motion to create a new technical oversight position, reporting directly to the CEO, passed with 1 abstention. The motion to require community input on all development decisions passed after heated debate, but ultimately with support. This is going to be messy, Richard warned as the meeting concluded. Investors will push back. Construction timelines will slip. We'll face challenges we haven't anticipated. Yes, Cassandra agreed, but we'll face them honestly. With the people affected having a voice in decisions, with safety prioritized over efficiency, with a model that proves development doesn't have to destroy communities to create value. 6 months later, Cassandra stood in the community garden on a morning very much like the one when she'd first walked these streets. But everything was different now. The garden was twice its original size, expanded into an adjacent lot with raised beds, a greenhouse, and a community teaching kitchen. The old buildings had been renovated with new systems, safe systems, human-centered systems, ones designed by engineers who actually understood how people lived. New construction rose beside them, integrated, not imposed, creating housing at multiple price points without displacing existing residents. The Horizon AI system had been completely rebuilt. The new version still optimized for efficiency, but with hard-coded safety priorities that couldn't be overridden for cost savings. Every emergency call got immediate response. Every uncertain situation defaulted to human control. Every decision that affected people's safety was reviewed by maintenance staff before implementation. It was less efficient on paper, less profitable in the short term, but people trusted it, and trust, it turned out, was worth more than optimization. Ethan worked from a new office in Horizon Tower, title of Technical Director for Human-Centered Systems, with hours that let him drop Ellie at school every morning and be home for dinner every night. He led a team that included Marcus and Tommy, along with new hires who had the technical expertise and the lived experience to understand when systems were failing people even while functioning perfectly. The development model they'd pioneered attracted attention from urban planners, housing advocates, and other developers who were tired of the extraction model that treated communities as obstacles to progress. Cassandra spoke at conferences about the importance of listening to the people who lived with the consequences of technical decisions, about the knowledge that came from maintenance workers who saw systems fail daily, about the necessity of putting human safety before profit margins. Some investors had walked away, uncomfortable with the new priorities. But others emerged, ones who wanted to be part of something different. The financial returns were solid, if not spectacular. The community impact was transformative, and the model was scaling, other cities asking how they could replicate what Riverside Commons had become. Today was special, though. Today was the official opening of Horizon 2.0, 1 year after the elevator incident that had changed everything. The ceremony was in the community garden, because that's where it had all started for Cassandra, standing at the gate that first morning, realizing what she'd been about to destroy. The crowd was diverse, residents who'd stayed in their homes, new residents moving into the integrated development, board members who'd voted to take the risk, maintenance workers who'd been elevated to technical directors, and city officials who were studying the model. Ellie sat in the front row wearing a purple dress with butterflies, holding her father's hand. Cassandra stepped up to speak, looking out at faces that were no longer just numbers in a database, but people she'd come to know, people whose homes she'd fought to preserve, people who'd taught her that progress meant building with communities instead of on top of them. "A year ago," she began, "I got trapped in an elevator on the worst possible day. I was stuck between floors with a man I'd never met, missing a board meeting I thought was crucial, disconnected from everything I believed was important. And in that elevator, that man asked me a question that changed everything. She looked at Ethan, who smiled slightly. He asked what happens when you scale flawed systems across entire neighborhoods. He asked what happens when the people making decisions never meet the people affected by them. He asked if I'd ever walked these streets, ever talked to residents, ever considered that the homes I was planning to demolish held memories and meaning that couldn't be replaced with new construction and better amenities. Cassandra paused, gathering her thoughts. I hadn't. I'd never walked these streets. I'd approved development plans without meeting a single resident. I'd deployed AI systems without talking to the maintenance workers who saw them fail daily. I'd made decision after decision based on financial projections and consultant reports, never asking if the numbers had names or if the optimization had costs I couldn't see from the 35th floor. She gestured around the garden, at the renovated buildings beyond, at the integrated community that had emerged from confronting hard truths. What you see here isn't just a development project. It's proof that another way is possible, that we can build without destroying, that we can use technology to serve people instead of replacing them, that we can create housing that works for everyone, not just the people who can afford luxury prices, and that the most important knowledge often comes from the people we've been ignoring, the maintenance workers, the residents, the community members who live with our decisions every single day. She looked directly at Ellie, who was watching with those serious eyes that reminded her so much of the question that had started everything. A very wise 8-year-old once told me that to see how flowers grow, you have to kneel down. You have to get close. And I've learned that's true for people too. You can't understand communities from a distance. You can't make good decisions about people's lives without talking to them. You can't build something meaningful without being willing to kneel down and see what's actually growing in the soil you're standing on. The crowd was silent, listening. Cassandra felt the weight of the moment, the fragility of what they'd built, and the importance of protecting it. This past year hasn't been easy. We've faced delays, budget overruns, investor pushback, and countless challenges we didn't anticipate. But we've also created something unprecedented. 250 families kept their homes. 200 new families found housing they can afford. This community stayed intact while growing stronger. And we proved that doing the right thing and building something profitable aren't mutually exclusive. They're complementary when you're willing to measure success by more than just financial returns. She paused, then added, "We couldn't have done this without the courage of people who spoke truth when no one wanted to listen. Without Ethan Cole, who risked his job to file reports everyone ignored. Without Marcus Webb and Tommy Rodriguez, who documented failures for months while being told they didn't understand the systems. Without community members who showed up to meetings and demanded their voices be heard. Without board members who were willing to reconsider everything they thought they knew about development. This is their success as much as mine." Richard Richardson stood up from the audience. "If I may say something." He waited for Cassandra's nod, then continued. "A year ago, I thought Cassandra was making a terrible mistake. I thought she was letting emotion override sound business judgment. I thought she was risking everything on the unqualified opinions of maintenance workers." He looked at Ethan. "I was wrong. About all of it. This project is succeeding not despite the changes we made, but because of them. Because we finally started listening to the right people. Because we measured success by community impact as well as financial return. Because we proved that the so-called trade-offs between profit and people are often false choices created by limited imagination." He sat down to applause, and Margaret Chen stood up. "I've spent my career evaluating technical systems. I've certified hundreds of projects based on specifications and performance metrics. But this project taught me that technical excellence means nothing if it doesn't serve human needs. That the most sophisticated AI in the world is worthless if it optimizes for profit at the expense of safety. That the people who work with systems daily often understand them better than the engineers who designed them." She looked at Marcus and Tommy. "Thank you for your patience in teaching me that. And thank you for trusting us with a second chance to get it right." The ceremony continued with speeches from residents, from city officials, from housing advocates who saw Horizon 2.0 as a model for the future. But the moment that stayed with Cassandra came at the end, when Ellie walked up with a drawing she'd made. It showed the community garden with flowers in every color, buildings rising behind it, and stick figures of people, lots of people, together. At the top, in careful child handwriting, a place where everyone has a home and daddies never get stuck. "This is for you," Ellie said, handing it to Cassandra. "Because you kept your promise. You tried really hard." Cassandra knelt down to Ellie's level, the way she'd learned to do when you wanted to really see someone. "Thank you, Ellie. This is beautiful. And you're right, trying hard is what matters, even when it's difficult. Even when you're not sure you'll succeed, you try anyway because people are counting on you." "Like Daddy tried in the elevator?" "Exactly like that." Ellie hugged her then, a quick, fierce embrace, and ran back to her father. Cassandra stood holding the drawing, feeling the weight of what a year could change. How one elevator malfunction could crack open assumptions that had seemed unshakable. How one honest voice could transform an entire company. How one choice to listen instead of assuming could ripple out into consequences that mattered. As the ceremony concluded and people dispersed into the garden and the renovated buildings and the new community spaces they'd built together, Cassandra found Ethan standing by the roses that had been planted in Sarah's memory. They were blooming now, pink and white and yellow, adding beauty to soil that held grief and love and memory. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being honest in that elevator, for showing me what I needed to see, for believing this was possible when I wasn't sure." "Thank you for listening," Ethan replied, "for being willing to change your mind, for fighting for this even when it risked everything." He paused, looking at the garden, at the buildings beyond, at his daughter playing with other children in a space that had been preserved because someone finally cared enough to try. Sarah would have loved this. She believed that small acts of kindness could change everything, that one person caring could make a difference. "I think she would have been proud of what you did." "I think she would have been proud of what you did," Cassandra said. "You never stopped caring, never stopped fighting for safety, even when no one listened, never stopped being both an engineer and a father. That's what made all of this possible." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the community they'd fought to preserve celebrate its transformation. Cassandra thought about that morning a year ago when she'd stood at this gate seeing it for the first time, realizing what she'd almost destroyed, about the elevator that had trapped them and the questions that had freed them both, about the distance between the 35th floor and the streets below, and how the most important work sometimes meant crossing that distance and kneeling down to see what was really growing. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Vale, this is Mrs. Patterson. I just wanted to say thank you for the new elevator system, for listening, for caring enough to fix what was broken. You gave an old woman back her dignity and her safety. That's worth more than you know." Cassandra's eyes blurred with tears. She showed the text to Ethan, who smiled. "That's what it's all about," he said softly. "People like Mrs. Patterson, kids like Ellie, communities like this one, making sure the decisions we make serve the people who have to live with them, making sure everyone has a home where they feel safe, making sure progress means building up instead of tearing down." "I couldn't have learned that without you," Cassandra said. "Without being trapped in that elevator on the worst possible day, forced to see what I'd been ignoring. Sometimes the best things come from the worst moments." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "Sometimes they do." Ellie ran up then, breathless and happy, her butterfly jacket gone in favor of the purple dress, her face bright with joy. "Daddy, can we plant something in the garden? For Mommy? Something new?" Ethan looked at Cassandra, who nodded. "Of course you can. What do you want to plant?" "Sunflowers," Ellie said immediately, "because they're tall and bright, and they make people smile. Mommy would like that." "Then sunflowers it is." They walked together to the tool shed, father and daughter, and the CEO who'd learned to kneel down and see what was really growing. Behind them, the community gathered in a garden that had been saved, in buildings that had been transformed, in a neighborhood that proved development could serve people instead of displacing them. 1 year after the worst possible morning, after an elevator malfunction that had seemed like disaster, Cassandra stood in the community she'd fought to preserve and understood that sometimes breaking down was the only way to break through, that sometimes failure was the beginning of wisdom, that sometimes the people at the bottom saw truths the people at the top desperately needed to hear. And sometimes, she thought, watching Ellie kneel in the soil beside her father, ready to plant seeds that would grow into beauty. Sometimes one brave voice speaking truth at the right moment really could rewrite an entire corporation and protect hundreds of homes. Sometimes trying hard really was what mattered. Sometimes showing up, listening, and caring enough to change was enough to transform everything. The sunflowers they planted that day would bloom later that summer, tall and bright, against the renovated buildings, a living reminder that growth was possible without destruction, that progress meant building with people instead of over them, and that the most important decisions were always the ones that put human dignity first. Cassandra returned to work on Monday with Ellie's drawing hung in her office, visible from her desk, a daily reminder of the promises she'd made and the future she'd chosen. The work ahead was challenging, more developments to redesign, more systems to rebuild, more communities to engage. But she faced it knowing that she wasn't alone, that she had Ethan and Marcus and Tommy and a whole team of people who understood that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. And on difficult days, when investors pushed back or timelines slipped or the old way seemed easier, she looked at that drawing of the garden where everyone had a home and daddies never got stuck, and remembered why they were doing the hard work of building something different. Because some promises were worth keeping, some voices were worth hearing, and some homes were worth fighting for, no matter what the spreadsheet said. The elevator incident that had changed everything became a story they told in company meetings, in conference presentations, in conversations with other developers who wanted to understand how to build better. It became a reminder that systems weren't neutral, that optimization had costs, that the people who lived with decisions deserved a voice in making them. But for Cassandra, it was something simpler and more profound. It was the moment she learned to see what she'd been missing, to listen to voices she'd been ignoring, to understand that the distance between the 35th floor and the streets below wasn't just vertical. It was moral, human, essential. And it was the moment she chose to cross that distance, to kneel down in the soil beside people like Ethan and Ellie, and to plant seeds that would grow into something none of them could have built alone. Together, they'd proven that another way was possible. Together, they'd built a future that honored the past. Together, they'd shown that progress meant protecting what mattered, not erasing it in the name of efficiency. And that was worth every risk, every challenge, every difficult choice along the way. The sunflowers bloomed that summer, bright yellow against blue sky, visible from the 35th floor, where Cassandra sometimes stood at the windows looking down at the community she'd learned to see. And every time she saw them, she remembered an 8-year-old girl telling her that to understand how things grow, you had to kneel down and get close. She remembered the lesson, and she kept kneeling. That made all the difference.